My next guest may be one of the best known and most award-winning news photographers on planet Earth. I am delighted to be joined by Doug Mills. Doug, thank you so much for joining me.
Jason, my pleasure. Looking forward to talking to you.
Absolutely. I'm surprised that there still remain a few people who don't know who you are, but of course, you are the photographer who took this amazing photograph of Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, as a bullet whizzed right by his head, and we can see it here in the thumbnail. It's an amazing picture, Doug. I know you've been doing a lot of interviews and talking about it a lot, but I just wanted to get in touch with you because so many people who watch Crowdsource the Truth remain confused about some of the very complicated technical details surrounding this photo. Just yesterday, someone told me that you took this picture with a camera operating at 8,000 frames per second. I think that's incorrect. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, that is incorrect, Jason. The number 8,000 is in there. That was the shutter speed that I was using. I was using a Sony A1 camera, and as you have right there, I was using a 24 millimeter lens, and it's a 1.4 lens, but I had it, as you can see, at 1.6, and my exposure time, or the shutter speed, was 1/8,000th of a second. And the ISO, I think, was around 60, I believe, or 54, something around, and very low ISO. And for those photographers who know anything about ISO or formerly ASA, that has to do with the lighting conditions, whatever, conditions you're in. And I was in a very sunny, bright situation where the sun was bearing down on the former president as he spoke. So I was dialing my camera up to 8,000th of a second, because I use that 1.4 lens, and I try and use it with the minimal depth of field that I can. And what I mean by that is just, if I'm photographing President Trump, I want him to be the main focus of that camera. So the depth of field behind him is very shallow. So therefore at 1.2, 1.4, 1.6, which is where I was at 1.6, the background goes out of focus. As you can see, the people in the background, they're not really sharp. And that's just the way I like photographing President Trump. And I do the same thing when I'm photographing President Biden, same thing when I photographed President Obama. So these are great prime lenses. They're called a prime lens. Very expensive, and they opened up to let in a lot of light. Most photographers will use a prime lens when they're shooting in a very low light situation, indoors, dark arena, dark house. A wedding photographer may use it also in a wedding to just capture the bride's face and everything else out, to be out of focus behind them.
Absolutely. And I mean, I don't want to question any kind of creative choice. Obviously, the lens, these settings, this is all very personal to the photographer. A lot of people have been asking, though, about, and thank you for sharing that ISO number, because I found it just odd that all these details were being given. I don't know that we've ever seen more ink spilled over the EXIF data of a particular photo than this one. And one question that remains, this resolution of 2,424 by 1,474, it doesn't really match any resolution that the Sony camera offers. I was wondering why we've only seen a cropped version of the photo.
That's a great question, Jason. So when I'm using that Sony A1 camera, it's at 50 megapixels. That's the normal view that, or the size of the file that you have when you put it in your laptop. If I were to take a picture of us right here on the computer, or of you, and I was using my Sony A1 in an uncropped mode, the pictures would come out at 50 megabytes. But there's something called a crop sensor built into the Sony camera. And it is something that photojournalists use quite often with this camera, because it basically, if you're using a 24, and I have it customized on my camera to be able to hit a button and say crop mode, and it zooms in automatically for you. The picture that I took there of when the bullet went by was a full 50 megabit file. It's probably because it's been cropped down in this, when I sent it to the New York Times, it was in a crop mode. Now I can also, while I'm photographing the president, you have other pictures up there. So what happened was, as I was photographing President Trump, and you see, I can show you I have a fully uncropped version of this photo, and it shows all of the flag above him, and that was what I was doing. These are all cropped in the ones that we use in the newspaper and online. So basically, I take it into Photoshop and I can crop it, just like I would any other picture when I'm photographing the president. And when this whole situation happened, I was photographing the president, and he gestured to his right, and I had my finger on the shutter speed, and I kept shooting as I heard the pop, pop, pop. I didn't know what it was. I'm not familiar with an AR-15 sound. I kind of either thought it was a motorcycle or firecrackers or something that somebody had put off in the field, because it was kind of, farmland next to us. So I, didn't pay any attention because there were so many people there. I really couldn't see over there. But anyway, I kept shooting, holding down my finger on the trigger, and was able to capture those moments. And then once the president went down behind the podium, I couldn't see him. And I had on a wide angle lens. So my immediate reaction was probably not the smartest thing, was I ran around to the side to try and see how he was, to see what was going on. And by the time those 2 seconds that went around, he was already completely smothered by members of the Secret Service. I think there's a stopwatch that somebody showed us, a video with stopwatch, and it was less than 3 seconds, just around 2 seconds before they were on top of him and covering him. So once he was in that particular position, he was further away from me than normal. So I hit the crop button on the camera. So it automatically zooms the lens in without having a zoom lens. So I know immediately I'm going from a 50 meg file down to a 25 or 24 meg file immediately. So that's what I did there. When he came off and pumped his fist, I had it in that crop mode because it was zooming in more on him, because when I first saw him stand up and he had the blood coming out of his ear, I was like, oh my gosh, he has been shot.
Right.
And by that time I had not looked at any of my images like I did after the event.
Sure.
But I saw the blood on his face and realized, yes, he'd been shot, and then he was whisked off.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, not to correct you,
Sure.
sir, but we're talking about a sensor crop, not technically an optical zoom. It has the same essential effect as zooming in terms of
Correct.
altering the field of view and the image size. But I just want our viewers not to be confused. So, and to make sure I understand what you've told us, this metadata here that represents 2,424 by 1474, this is the resolution, that's the maximum resolution you have of this image, is that correct?
I can go, if you give me a second.
I guess what I'm getting at is there any way to share the raw file? I know I'm asking you for the negative, and photographers are very sensitive about sharing this information, but I mean, you've told us this has been through Photoshop, it's been to the New York Times. There's a huge technical process here that I think a lot of people
Sure.
aren't familiar with. And in the latest cameras, sometimes these cameras have Wi-Fi and connect to your phone and
They
can
do.
send
Mine
the
does
picture.
that too. Yeah.
So this is sent to the New York Times as you're taking them, right? So if the camera's destroyed, the picture is still there.
Correct. Yes, that is exactly right. So, if so, while this all was happening, I had my camera, my Sony camera, connected to a Sony device that allows me to transmit directly to the New York Times from my camera. So that's basically hooked up to either a Verizon, AT&T, or a T-Mobile,
Like a
user.
hotspot.
Exactly. It's exactly like a hotspot. So I'm trying to see where I've lost you on the connection here. There you are.
Zoom
But
gets away
I
from
got
you.
it now. Yeah, I'm just going through different. So anyway, yes, I was able to connect my phone, and I had it connected the whole time with me, and I was able to transmit directly. So when it first happened, of course, I'm not thinking anything about transmitting. I didn't transmit these photos to the office until after the president had been put in an SUV and taken to the hospital, that a member of the Secret Service came over to the 4 photographers that were allowed in that buffer zone that were around the president and said, "Hey guys, you're walking through my crime scene right now. You've got to leave. I need to put you in a tent," which was formerly the president's hold, before he came on stage. So they walked us back behind the risers where his supporters were, and they took us into there. And that's when I first started sending pictures. So once I started, and again, Jason, the last thing I thought about was that moment that the bullet went by, because I didn't know I had it. I was looking at my camera and looking through the viewfinder and saying, "Oh my gosh, he's pumping his fist, his blood on his face." So I'm sending those, and they took, probably less than 15 seconds to send per picture. And I sent them all in, and then everybody, again, I'm in a tent. The shooting has just happened. There are members of the president's staff that are visibly shaken, some of them crying. And so there was, it was very quiet in there, very quiet. And so after I sent those pictures in, I thought, "Oh my gosh, I need to go back and look at what else I had. Did I have any pictures of him?" I remember taking pictures when he gestured, because I'm always somebody who, whenever the president gestures, I'm always taking pictures, because I think that helps tell the story rather than just
Sure.
his face looking ahead. So anyway, he was gesturing to his right, and I was like, "Oh yeah." So then I went back through them and I started looking at it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I did." And I hadn't zoomed in, Jason. I had it, because there's a button on the camera also that once you're looking at it in the viewfinder, you can hit a magnification that would bring me up to, a more cropped version of it in the viewfinder. But again,
Yeah.
I wasn't looking at it that closely.
Right.
So I sent those images in, and I called the office and I said, "Hey, I'm sending you in some pictures now of the moment around when he was, shot at." And they said, "Okay, great. They're coming in now." And I said, "Yes, I'm sending you in like 10 of them." Because again, my camera was shooting probably 20 frames a second. So I think I probably sent in roughly 10, or as many as I could right then. And then the closer I looked, I could see that, once he heard it, then he winced, and then he grabbed his ear, and then he looked at it, and I could see the blood.
Hmm.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh, he has been shot." So the I when I spoke with one of our reporters, who called me and said, "I hear you're on the scene. What can you tell me?" All I'm seeing is television. It doesn't show anything other than what's going on, that he had come off stage, his face is bloody. There are reports that the bullet hit a teleprompter, and there's glass shattering from the teleprompter, and that hit his ear. And I said, "Well, I'm looking at photographs of the teleprompter right now, and it's fully intact. You cannot see it. So um, you can't see any damage to the teleprompter." So I said, "But I can see him when he puts his hand to his ear and he pulls his hand out and he sees the blood in it, and then he goes down. So clearly something hit his ear. We heard gunshots. The Secret Service is yelling, 'Active shooter, get down, get down.' There's no other question in my mind then that he had been shot in the ear."
Yeah. I
And
mean, this.
Jason, I am more than happy to share you a raw file. The conspiracy theories are something that bothers me, because, you know, I've got eaten alive on Twitter. I've been phone calls to my phone about it. And it's just, and again, going back to when I sent the photos from my camera to the office, I sent them into the office, and our photo editor, who was in charge then, Jen, called me back and said, "Oh my God, you won't believe this." She said, "We just cropped up one of your pictures, and it shows the bullet going behind his head." I was like, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, one of the bullets is passing behind him." And I said, "Well, before you do that, before we say that, can I please send you the raw image from my laptop? That is a JPEG file, a small JPEG file, just so there's no reflections. There's no, who knows what it could be. I have no, I was just saying, wait, let's, this is a big
Right.
deal. Let me send you the raw
Yeah.
image." So probably 2 or 3 minutes later, one of the president's staff came back into the tent, and I begged him to let us out. I said, I need to get my laptop. I've got something that's very important. The New York Times has already contacted a FBI forensic um, person, and they were already on the phone with them and contacting them and saying, we need you to look at this. Can you verify this is a bullet? And so I said, I need to get this picture to them in a raw format, and upload it to you and let you see it. So we got out of the tent. We were escorted back by the Secret Service and police to the tent. I picked up my laptop. I put it in. I sent the pictures immediately. And by the time I got to my car, because then they escorted us to the gates of the rally, and we had to go sit in the parking lot. And so by the time I got to the car, they said, "Yeah, it's confirmed with these last images that it is a bullet."
It's an amazing story, Doug, I tell you. And I mean, that had to be one of the most, with all the shooting, I mean, you're right in the middle of it, and yet your instincts as a photographer tell you to just drive in there and get the photo. People might not realize this, but you are also the photographer who famously took images of George W. Bush on 9/11. You have been a witness and a front row participant to some of the most historic moments in recent American history.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I remember that day like it was yesterday also. Yeah, I was working for the Associated Press at the time, and was traveling with President Bush to Florida, and he was basically the beginning of a No Child Left Behind Education Week that the administration was launching. The First Lady, Laura Bush, was also going to be testifying on Capitol Hill at the same time about this same program. And I was with the president that morning when he went for a jog on a golf course not far from his hotel before the sun came up. And he normally would run maybe a mile or 2 miles. And this time he ran 2 loops around and was full sweated. And, then he went back to the hotel. We motorcaded back to the hotel. They checked all of our cameras again. They re-swept us. It's calling sweeping when the president's, the presidential Secret Service check us, and there's a team called the EOD, Explosive Ordnance Detail. They come and check all of every time we're with the president, anywhere we go with him, we go through, that kind of checkpoint, no matter what. When we get on Air Force One, anytime we go through that checkpoint. So anyway, we were at the hotel. We went back over to the school, and we were driving up to that elementary school in Florida. And back then, cell phones were not as prevalent as they are now. And I think there was a bag phone in the middle of the car, the van we were in. And I think the Gordon Jandro, a personal aide and deputy press secretary of the president, was in the front seat, and he picked up he got a call, and he goes, "What's going on?" And he basically said, they were briefing him on a plane crash in New York City. And he said, "How big a plane?" And unknown. And, he just kept asking questions. And then finally, he turned around at us, and we were like, "What's going on? A plane? Where?" And he said, "Now there's been from what we hear right now, a small plane crash in New York City. It hit a building. We don't know anything other than that."
Let me pause you a second, Doug, because this is an amazing story. You're on Air Force One leaving Florida with George Bush on September 11th?
Yes. But this all happened when we were pulling up to the school, when the Gordon Jandro got a phone call that we were pulling up to the school where the president was going to sit in this classroom, read some books with the children, and then he was going to address this group about a program that the administration was, really getting deep into and publicizing, the No Child Left Behind program. So yeah, we were arriving, and so literally we walked into the school thinking, "Oh gosh, a plane crash. This is probably going to deter from this news story, depending on how big it is." But he's, at the time, Gordon said it was a small plane that had hit a building in New York City. So we didn't know anything. And then when we got into the classroom, everything was normal. We didn't, it was typical, him sitting there. And all of a sudden I saw Andy Card, his chief of staff, walk into the classroom. And I've known Andy for a long time because Andy Card worked for Bush 41 as president. Yes, there's the moment there. And when he walked in the classroom, I saw Andy standing at this door, and I thought, my goodness, why is Andy Card the chief of staff coming into a classroom. Very unusual to me. So I looked at him. I couldn't get eye contact with him. I was trying because I know him and I've been around him. It's not like we have dinner together, but I've known him and I see him around the White House. I see him on the plane. I had known him for years. And finally I caught his eye and I go, I put my hands out. I was like, what's going on? And he basically just, gave me a number 2 like this. And I was like, peace, 2, what's that gesture? I didn't know. I
Two
was
planes.
had no idea what it was. And then he, probably 30 seconds later, he waited till there was a slight lull because the teacher was speaking. I don't think he wanted to interrupt her. And then I think he realized I have to get in and tell the president what's going on. So he, leaned over and told the president, which we didn't find out until the day we were flying up to New York to ground zero, what he actually told him. And he whispered into his ear, said, Mr. President, a second aircraft has just hit the World Trade Center. America's under attack.
It's a stunning
So, yeah,
moment,
that was,
Doug. Thank you for
thank you.
sharing
Yeah,
that.
it's crazy.
There's a little wrinkle to this story that many people don't know about. I wonder if you do. You were at unique risk that day. Have you ever heard, this is Reuters reporting on this, on September 11th, drama on Air Force One unfolds in Bush aides' handwritten notes. The pilot of Air Force One reports that he received a phone call telling him that Angel is next. Fleischer notes, that's Ari Fleischer, an eerie reference to a communication heard on the plane from the ground that Angel is next, because Air Force One's code name is Angel. This was a phone call to the cockpit saying this. Had you heard this story before?
I had not heard that, Jason, until it was reported, I think, first by Ari Fleischer, who another guy that I know and have known for years, really respect him. He was very helpful to me on 9/11 with my access to the president. But yet the reason it that brings up memories is because when we were in flight, when we left Florida, we asked members of the staff, we asked our Secret Service agent. The Secret Service sits in a cabin ahead of us, right? In the plane. They're not in our cabin. They have their own exclusive cabin. And he happened to walk back to go to the restroom. And I said to him, where are we going? And he said, my last word was that we were instructed we were going back to the White House. And by that time, the cameraman and the sound man who were on the plane from CBS News, the cameraman was a former Eagle Scout. And Eagle Scouts carry compasses. And he had a compass on him at the time.
He said, we're not
And he
going to
pulled up
D.C.
Yeah, he realized, he said, no, we're going east. We're not
Wow.
going north. So we were way out over the ocean and circling well above regular air traffic. By this time, we were hearing that planes were being grounded all over the country. And the reason this jumps out is because shortly after that, maybe when this word came that Angel was next, members of the Air Force police that ride on Air Force One, who are always on board the plane, and they have their own cabin also on the other side of the plane, rushed back into our cabin and made an announcement and said, listen, I need you to hear me very clearly. Everybody needs to take whatever they're holding in their bags and turn it upside down and put it on the ground. Everything in your, we're in the belly checking through everybody's luggage. But right now we need to open up every piece of equipment that you guys have to make sure nothing was put into your camera bags or your jackets or anything like that. So that happened while we were on board the plane, flying around at probably 45,000 feet. And it scared the hell out of all of us. And I think, and now in hindsight, now we know why they came back and did that. It's probably shortly after, the Air Force One pilot took that call, because they're like, oh shit, maybe somebody put something
Someone's
into
infiltrated.
one of the photographer
Yeah.
or one of the members of the media's camera bag that wouldn't be seen. So, it was just another precaution that
Yeah.
takes place on Air Force One. And there's so many security precautions and measures that we go through every time we go on board that plane.
Amazing. It's a fascinating story. Let me take you back to July 13th for a second, because when I first read that you were using a 24 millimeter lens, that's what I thought. It's like, this is studio photography or wedding
Hmm.
photography. Seems a little of an unusual choice to take to sort of a news event where you don't really know. I know a lot of professional photographers who just don't like prime lenses, and I had noticed
Hmm.
that in a lot of previous photos, you're using this beautiful Canon zoom. You got an EOS
Yeah,
1.
that's
Why
back
did you
when I had
choose
a
a prime
mustache
that
for
day?
one thing. Well, I think because when I switched over to Sony, which was probably, I don't know, 10 years
2018?
ago. Yep, 28. Is that how long it was? Maybe not 10 years ago then. It seems
Sony
like a
made a
long
big
time
deal out
ago.
of it. They've got this
They
big
did.
promotion.
They did. Yeah, I was on C-SPAN, a couple other, talking about it just because, it's a different tool. Photographers are into tools, just like carpenters are into tools, just like anybody who works with their hands wants the best tool in their hand. And when Sony introduced me to this camera, I fell in love with it and it was completely silent. That 70 to 200 that I was using on the Canon lens, on that Canon camera, Sony makes the same thing, but it's much lighter. The camera there, I think I was using an EOS 1N at the time when I was using that camera there. I think it's an EOS 1. Yep, much heavier, bulkier camera.
This is a reflex
Um,
camera, right? So they've got the optics to
that
go through.
yes, SLR, yeah, electronic SLR. Now the Sony A1s are mirrorless, so they're completely silent. So that was the other thing about using that why I switched. They were completely silent. Nobody knew when you were taking a picture. In politics, that's important. You're not distracting anybody in the room. You can walk into a room, be invited into the room as a behind the scenes photographer or covering something that where people are talking and it's completely silent. The other thing is the members of the TV community and sound people fell in love with them right away also because they didn't make noise. You watch a video now in the Oval Office when the president goes into the Oval Office and he shaking hands or gesturing or talking to somebody, you hear every word he says. Before that, when 8 or 10 or 12 or 14 photographers are in that room and we're all banging down, banging on our shutters, you can't even hear the president speak. And then you get back out of the Oval Office and you walk into where the TV land is and they're yelling at you. We couldn't
Yeah.
hear a damn word he said for all the motors and all the shutters making all
Cacophony
that
of
noise.
clicking, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That was an
Yeah.
interview there with Brian Lamb. Um, so yeah, the Sony, and also when I switched to Sony, they started introducing really light prime lenses. And there was a photographer from Reuters, Jason Reed, who was really into prime lenses. And I normally would use a 24 to 70 zoom. I would use 70 to 200 lens. And then Jason Reed was really into the prime lenses. And I thought, gosh, one of these days, but they were so big and heavy and bulky um, that when I switched to Sony, I asked the officers, hey, I love the look of this shallow depth of field. It's so crisp. They're so sharp. Can I get some? And they were like, of course, yes, let's order you some. So that's why I use them. I have a 51.2. I have a 24-1.4. I have an 85, I believe it is 1.4 also. I have a 135 prime lens. I think it's a 1.8 or
Wow, they're
2.0.
all super fast. So is this
They're
done?
super fast.
Are these lenses faster and lighter because for people who don't understand what we're talking about, a traditional
Sure.
professional camera used a reflex optic where you're looking through a mirror through the lens when you're framing the shot, and then when you click the shutter, the mirror actually moved out of the way. And so this required a larger lens and more optics in order to accommodate all that stuff in front of the imaging plane. Isn't that right?
That is correct. Yes. And the
So it's
mirrorless
interesting.
lens, there's no mirror that goes up and comes back down. And that allows to focus faster, especially on sports. I shoot a lot of sports in my job. I love shooting sports, and that is a huge advantage when something can follow focus when you are shooting sports, especially at a high frame rate. And again, it was all about using the best tool in your hand. And I've always been a tool guy. I always wanted the best lenses and the best cameras. And when Sony introduced these cameras, I couldn't wait to use them.
Yeah. You know, does this camera integrate AI at all? Because I noticed, I mean, obviously the camera has the technical capability to snap this image, but I've done a bit of high-speed photography myself. I mean, I've never been a professional still or news photographer, but I have some experience in visual effects, and I was a stereoscopic cinematographer for many years. So we've done some high-speed photography, you know, for Elements, did a visual effects unit on X-Men Days of Future Past and stuff like that. And normally we're using, you know, phantom cameras. The other thing that people are confused about, and forgive me, I should have opened with this. I meant to compliment you, Doug, because we always hear that, you know, a picture, it tells 1,000 words, but in many ways, this is perhaps the best composed and most telling photograph in history, because if someone had no other information than this, they would realize that someone took a shot at Donald Trump and it missed. It's just astounding, the composition. The luck, it's like winning the lottery twice, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And I have heard, and thank you for that compliment. I appreciate it. Believe me, I always say it's better to be lucky than good. And clearly I was very lucky then. I was actually sitting in an airport the morning after the shooting, trying to board another flight, and I had my pictures up, and I was sending other images from that event, and I happened to have this picture up on my screen, and this gentleman walked by me, and he put his head over his shoulder. He goes, "Do you mind if I look?" And I said, "No, not at all. I'm not hiding anything. I'm just working." And he said, "Well, I see that picture all over the internet." And I said, "In what capacity? You know, like, really?" You know, and he said, "Well, my gosh, everybody's talking about it. They can't believe that it's a bullet." And he said, "And I'm kind of a marksman." And he said, "I have lots of guns. I have an AR-15. And, you know, to be able to stop that bullet like that is really remarkable. And yes, there are people second guessing it." And I said, "Well, are you second guessing it?" And he said, no, I see it's there because I've looked at it so many times since I saw it last night." And he said, "One of my theories is that could have been the bullet that hit his ear. And when it hit his ear, it slowed down enough for you to capture it." And I was,
Dubious.
whoa. So I was like, wait, I have not heard that.
Doubtful of that.
Yeah. And I said, you know, and he said, "But that's one of my theories." And that's, you know, he says, "Believe me, all my friends in my gun club are all talking about this picture this morning." And so it was, you know, it was very interesting. And I, you know, other people have come up with theories around that it, you know, first, of course, the unfortunate one that it hit the teleprompter first when in fact it didn't. And again, I could open my computer and show you how wide a frame this is and how much it's been cropped from the raw picture if you want to see it. I don't know how to share my, you know, I'm not, but I can, if you.
Well, we don't have to do that right now. If you want to
but I'm
just
happy
send
to
it
show
to
it
me.
to you.
Well, sure. Just hit share screen. You should be able to do
All right,
that.
Let me pull up the just because, you know, I'm somebody who doesn't like having.
Yeah, we want to be out in the open with all this.
Absolutely.
I mean, and the New York Times isn't, not to blame them specifically, but there's a couple different things that like aren't helping you very much with this in terms of the people who doubt any aspect of the photograph. Because, you know, when you Google something like Doug Mills bullet and then go to photos and switch to large, the largest image that the New York Times will let us look at is 1600 by 900. That's pretty much the largest image.
Oh, that's probably because of the resolution for the web, is my guess.
Well, right. Yeah.
Plus,
and it's not
they
just
don't
your
want
photo.
people stealing it.
Well, there's a lot of reasons. I've noticed several things, not just your photo, but several images from this event have been only made available to the public at extremely low resolutions. Now, it was interesting to note that Yandex, which is a Russian search engine, sort of the equivalent of Google, this publishes the image at 2048 by 1346, which is a much more standard 2K, I guess 4 by
Who
3.
published that?
I'm not sure who published it, but I've got it here on Yandex.
Oh,
and it's
okay.
also interesting because it gives us more of your frame. We see the flag in the very top here. And it's ironic because the image that ultimately got published in the New York Times, we don't see any of that soft bokeh in the background with the audience falling out of focus. It's just clear blue sky.
All right, let me see. Well, all right, let me see if I may have moved this to a hard drive. Let me see if I can find. I have so much stuff on my laptop right now.
No rush. So the other thing that I wanted to ask about, because when I was looking at that, 2K version of the image that I was able to get from Yandex, there are certain things in the image that became sort of more apparent. And I don't know, maybe this is, I don't have one of those Sony A1 cameras. I don't know the characteristics of it or anything. I don't know if you can even see this on your screen, but there's a bit of a double.
I was looking at them.
Oh, sorry. Bit of a doubling that happens on the edge of the hat here that I couldn't quite explain. I mean, we see it, someone
That's
online
probably just being blown up beyond, Command Plus, and probably did that.
I took this from the 2048 by 1356 image, which is the highest resolution one I was able to get. And I just noticed this sort of unsteadiness around the text and the high contrast areas of the hat. Someone said it's chromatic aberration. I've evaluated a lot of lenses, and I think if this were chromatic aberration, we'd see green fringes here. We'd see something around his collar. Also, you're talking about a prime lens. This should have very, very little chromatic aberration. I just couldn't explain this at all.
I can't explain. I mean, it's whether
obviously,
it's
at 1/8,000th of a second, any motion of a human like Donald Trump, however quickly he can move his head, would be absolutely frozen in time if we're able to freeze the motion of a supersonic projectile like this, right?
Right. That is true.
Weird things happen with photography, so I just couldn't explain it. And I know you're a very technical guy, so I wanted to ask about that. And then the other thing that I had noticed was, so Sony is obviously a very huge conglomerate with lots of different developments. They have introduced this intelligent vision sensor, which is, I think, actually not a particular sensor, but rather an array of sensors and software that use a photosensitive chip like the one in any Sony camera, along with an array of other sensors, types of things that are used for autofocus and range detection and other things like that. And it can do various AI functions within the camera. One of the things that I noticed in looking up this patent was issued in 2022, or forgive me, 2023. It was applied for in 2022, but obviously this technology would have been in development for many years. One of the things that Sony tells us it can do in the patent is to select a goal and to trigger a photograph by motion. And I just wonder if there were any artificial intelligence features in use when you captured this image.
I don't know enough about that at all. I wouldn't know how to do it or how to use it. I mean, I don't use any sort of AI in Photoshop. That's completely forbidden with the New York Times.
Or this wouldn't be generative AI. This is using artificial intelligence to detect changes in the live image as seen on the sensor. And I'm just spitballing because so many people, whatever kind of explanation I try to give somebody for how this would be done, they doubt it. And I mean, like I said, I've done some high-speed photography myself, so it certainly does defy credulity that not only can we capture this within a frame, but we get it with such perfect. Because if it was over here, admittedly, it would not be as good of a photograph because it would leave people with this sort of eerie sense that Trump was about to get shot. This becomes the hero shot with the bullet behind his head leaving because it tells the whole story of the day. Somebody fired on the president and the entire country dodged a bullet.
Right, for sure. They did. He is, as I told him, one lucky guy. And
so what was the original resolution of the photo, and why would the New York Times publish?
What's that?
The thing that I object
Yeah,
to
I
on the
got
part of the New York Times is that they're publishing this metadata, and this is supposed to be data about the photo, not data about the edited photo. So when they're using this 2424 by 1474, it just seems like such a strange resolution. A lot of people wonder why we'd be on a relative, not a 35, not a 50, but a 24. I agree with you. I would have selected a 24 to 70 for a day like that, given the position you were in. But I'm not you, and I might like a red
right.
shirt where you might like a blue shirt. So my choices mean nothing. This is the way the photo was
Let
taken.
I have found the folder. If you'd like me to share my
Sure,
screen, let
absolutely.
me find let me find where you are. There you are. Share. Okay. Desktop. Share. All right. I can't see what you can see right now. I don't know what I can
It's
see,
still
but
you there.
all right. Let me try
Make sure
again.
I've got this set. I usually have it set so that people can share.
Yeah, it says application, Windows, um, share and
Yeah,
found.
all participants can share. Well, if you
Let's
can't
see.
get it, listen, Doug, I don't mean to
Hold
put
on.
you
No,
out
I
lot.
want to do it. Are you kidding
Yeah,
me? I am happy to share it. Allows you. Okay.
if it becomes a challenge, you could send it to me afterwards,
Oh,
whatever's
okay.
easier for you. But I really do
Let's see.
appreciate your time in joining us today. Uh,
Absolutely.
is there anything else that you would want to share about the day, about your recollections, any Secret Service people you interacted with, FBI people, anything like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've talked to, you know, some of the Secret Service who were there, some of the people you see in the photographs of him, um, you know, jumping on stage, the agents who have jumped on stage, they have come to me and talked to me about the photo themselves and about the photos that I sent. Um, and, it's, it was a scary moment for everybody. I mean, they're risking their lives, and then to see the diagram and other things on the internet that people have put out about how close the bullets went over top of him after he went down. After the president fell to the ground, that actually his range was starting to track down towards the president, so he was actually aiming further down, and those went right over the agents as they were on the stage, covering the president. They weren't shot, thankfully. It's so sad that somebody lost their life and two people are still struggling for their lives. And that's, the first time I talked to the president about it, that's what I said. I said, first time I saw him was in Milwaukee after the shooting, backstage. And he said, Doug, how are you doing? I was like, Mr. President, I'm doing fine. How are you doing? And he said, I'm doing fine. I'm fine. And so then I said, I'm thankful that you weren't more seriously injured. And I'm very sad that somebody lost their life and two other people were, tragically injured and fighting for their lives right now. So we talked about that for a couple minutes, and then it was back to work. It was just like, then I'm back to doing my journalism job, and um, he's, about to go on stage. So, it's pretty remarkable that he was there just a couple days after this happened, and wasn't certainly didn't appear to be, at all bothered by it, other than, you know, the obviously bandage on his ear and so forth. But yeah,
Seems like you
other
have
than
a
that,
pretty good relationship with him, it sounds like.
I do. Oh yeah, I do. I mean, I do. I think I have with every president that I've covered since Ronald Reagan. We see each other all the time. I am always very respectful of their duties. Ronald Reagan had a great relationship with. George Bush Sr. had a fantastic relationship with. Um, Bush, Clinton and Gore had a great relationship with them. I think, people forget that we are around the president so much, and I'm somebody who that's my job is to cover the president on a daily basis. And then I get to go out and do sports, which, breaks up the sometimes the monotony or the boredom sometimes that can come with being in the White House press corps. But um, it's yeah, I mean, I feel like I have that respect because I respect their job and they respect what I'm doing. And I've always been one. I don't have a tie on right now, but I go to work with a shirt and tie on every day at the White House. And I learned that from the first president I covered, which is Ronald Reagan, because he never went into the Oval Office without a suit coat on. And I was a young 22, 23-year-old at the time. And I learned a lot from that. And I've learned a lot about working at the White House. Sometimes you're treated how you look. Um,
Some people would
and
say that's true of anywhere that you go. Forgive me for interrupting,
exactly.
but were you present at the Ronald Reagan assassination attempt?
I was not. My colleague, Ron Edmonds, who won the Pulitzer for that series of photographs, was there. And he is somebody I talk to quite often after that assassination attempt, because you never know how you're going to react in something like that. And I asked him, multiple times, what were you thinking? What did you do? And he said, I guess, Doug, my instincts were to go forward and not go back. So he went forward and he kept shooting his camera, and he was using a Nikon at the time. Um, and Ron is was a wonderful colleague. Sadly, he passed away a couple months ago. I just went to his memorial 2 weeks ago in Vienna, Virginia. He left behind him a wonderful wife and daughter, and I admired Ron's work, and he didn't blink that day.
It's amazing, Doug. I mean, it's too bad you weren't at the Reagan attempt because you might be in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most frequent assassination witness
Yeah,
in
I'm
history.
so glad I wasn't. Yeah, I'm so glad I wasn't because I mean, when you look back on it now, Jason, it's pretty damn scary. I mean,
I'm sure. I
we
mean,
were
you're
all
getting
at
shot
risk.
at. Your life
Yeah,
was at risk. Oh, I have
yeah.
one more question I want to ask you. I'm
Sure.
sorry, Doug. A lot of people have been
No, you're
asking
good.
me about this guy who you might know. This is Art Visam, and he is a videographer for
Hmm.
ABC. Do you know him, or did you recognize him?
I've heard his name before. Looks somewhat familiar. What's his? Was he at
He's
Butler?
apparently missing. I'm just getting this story right now.
What?
People are messaging me on Twitter asking why I'm not discussing this guy, pointing out to me that he hasn't been heard from in 3 weeks. And there are pictures of him present in Butler, Pennsylvania. I don't know if this story is true or not. I don't personally know Art. I did look at his LinkedIn, and it seems that we're connected to someone who, when I think about it, I worked for this person 30 years ago, and I'm trying to remember if I did know Art. But if I did,
Do
I
you know
haven't
what
seen him in 30
office he
years.
worked out of?
I
Do you
don't.
know what bureau what's he work ABC or CBS?
ABC is who he was working
ABC.
for there.
Well,
DC, I
I don't
believe.
recognize him out of Washington,
No, I think he's
not
New
covering the
York.
White House.
No, I
Oh, he
think New
must have
York.
been out of New York. There were a lot of cameramen, camera women, sound people that were out of New York because it's so close to Pennsylvania, who were at the event. It was, I mean, and that's one of the things. That day was so hot.
Oh, yeah.
Um, People were needing medical attention all day long. So
Interesting. Yeah,
I
maybe
don't
that
know
happened
him.
and we don't know. Well, so did you have any sense? I know this is very difficult even for experienced people who have been around guns. Did you have any sense that there was more than one person shoot? I mean, it's hard to know also because we had counter snipers and everything, right?
Right, right. I have listened to the audio, Jason, a number of times because there was a clip that somebody, I think, sent from a phone of somebody standing over in the grass near where it happened, and I remember it. It's funny, one of those things. What do you remember? How many shots were fired? And the first time, I thought I only remember hearing, maybe four, maybe five. When it turns out there were, four, and then four more. And then that last shot that you hear from the Secret Service on the audio sounds so different than the AR-15. And that's
Right.
because they're clearly using a different rifle with a much higher velocity on it, and also probably had some sort of, silencer or muzzle on it that they use. And this is a view that I've not seen. Um, so yeah, it is remarkable that he was able to get up on that roof and not be seen by anybody other than the general
Everybody
public at the
standing
time.
there screaming.
Yeah,
It's a
exactly.
little bit, that part of the story is quite screwy, but we still don't
And I
know.
think yeah, and I think as you said, we don't know. There's so many investigations going on, but from where I am in the White House press corps and traveling with former President Trump, my relations with the Secret Service are always of the most professional. They are a group of men and women who take their jobs so damn seriously and are constantly on edge because of their duty. They're there to protect, and their odds are a lot, worse than somebody who wants to harm the president because it's an incredibly difficult job. And I think everybody that's on what's called PPD, the Presidential Protection Detail, that were around the former president, did heroic work. I mean, they were on the damn stage within seconds and got him off of there. And, the counter sniper guys were there. Now, whether the other snipers couldn't see across because of the frame or whether somebody was sitting inside the same building, secured, local security.
Right.
That's the people I deal with are some of the counter sniper people and the PPD division of the Secret Service and even the uniform division Secret Service at the White House. They are first class people who take their job so seriously and are so dedicated. They work the most incredible hours, and it's unfortunate that they're taking the hit, but on this because they're taking so much criticism. Yes, that's their job. But obviously this was the perfect storm for this shooter. And there were just, lapses along the way that this happened.
Just real quick question on Secret Service. You
Sure.
mentioned that you interact with the uniformed Secret Service officers. Did you see this guy on July 13th?
I don't recognize him. Our interaction, Jason, is basically we come in. We went into that event as a member of the media. We are required to be there. I think we had to be there at probably 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. And we go through. We put all of our equipment if you look back at the big overall where you see the stage and the press riser and all of that, we go there. We put our equipment there. It usually anywhere from 6 to 8 hours before the event. And our equipment is put there, and then the members of the Secret Service with the K9, the EOD team, Explosive Ordnance Detail team,
Sniff it.
sniff it, go through our bags. They open it up. They look through every compartment. They look through cameras. They turn them on to make sure they're functioning. And again, you're talking about probably 150 media there, maybe.
It's a lot of work.
So, yeah. So, in my recollection from that day was we did everything in the morning. We dropped all the equipment and all of us left. We came back. I think it was probably 2 to 3 hours later, and they were still doing the sweep. So we waited probably another 30 to 45 minutes to get in because they had not finished, their normal sweep. That happens at
So you
lots of
leave the
events.
equipment there and you walk away and they have all your photos, your laptop, everything?
Everything.
Wow. Does that make you nervous?
That's, of course. I mean, I don't worry what they're going to do to it. I worry that
But you're just without
someone
your
else,
stuff.
yeah, you're without the gear, and
They could lose it.
if something were to happen, sometimes you can take a camera. We will usually ask the uniform division, "Hey, I need to take a camera with me back out." They said, "Okay, it'll be checked when you get back
When
in."
you
But
come
all
back.
the other stuff, yeah, but all the other stuff, the big equipment, the big cameras, the laptops, the long lenses, all that stuff has to stay here so we can sweep it.
Wow. Doug, I really appreciate you taking the time and answering these questions and joining us and speaking to the Crowdsource the Truth audience. Doug Mills is a New York Times photographer, and he's worked as a photographer in the Washington Bureau since 2002, covering all these presidents since Ronald Reagan. There's no way you're going to open a newspaper or look at the internet and not see Doug's work. I really do appreciate you joining us today. And Doug, please take your time in locating the metadata and the raw file.
Can we try and share now again, Jason?
Oh yeah, sure. If you've got it, let's look at it before we go.
I mean, I've got it. I've got it on my, I'm just trying to figure out how, when I hit share, it says open system settings. All right, let me try this.
Are you on a Mac? You probably have to grant it permission to allow Zoom to record the screen.
I'm going to my privileges, which I have to request through the New York Times.
They only let the FBI look at your private information without asking. Everything else takes a million steps. So what's the next big assignment? There's going to be another rally in Butler, PA, apparently. Will you go?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I will go. My next, I leave tomorrow to go to Florida, and then I'll join up with President Trump in Palm Beach on Friday morning and fly to Montana with him.
Wow.
And then I'll be in Montana on Friday night for his rally at 8 p.m. local time there. And then I will fly back on Saturday. So it's asking me, Jason, to quit my Zoom and reopen. Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, we can do that. Sure. Let's do that real quick.
I will quit and do that.
And if we lose you, we'll just get it on an email or something. But I do appreciate Doug making all this effort to get the image here on screen. There we go. He's coming back in. I think it's working. We're about to.
I think it is.
There we go.
All right. Let me go to that. Later. Go back and do share, and hopefully it'll let me share. There you go. Share this.
Okay. Here we go.
There you are.
Nice.
There you go.
Oh, look at that. This is a rare glimpse into essentially the contact sheet.
This is literally, and as you see, what it says there is ARW. That is Sony's raw file names.
Right.
And if you want to look at the metadata on that, let me see. Let me move this window over there. You can see 6:02 p.m., 24 millimeter lens, ISO 64. Shutter speed there is 5,000. Okay.
Yep.
So let's see. So basically he came in, you can see him taking pictures, almost looks like video, as you can see.
Right. This camera does do 30 frames per second. So to be clear, were you in sort of like a motor drive mode holding the button down? Or you were, okay.
Holding the shutter down, yep. And as you can see, he makes lots of gestures. Walks to the podium, and let's see, I'm trying to move this screen out of the way now. Oops. Speaking here, this is not the time. Then I went backstage. We're not back behind the stage. Okay. And then I'm shooting with other lenses at this time. And as you see here, I'm 0.008 of a second, 1/6. See it?
Yep.
And I'm back. Okay. He's gesturing here. No problem. All of a sudden, he looks over. Boom.
Oh, it's really quite a wide frame there. So you're shooting vertically at times. Uh-huh.
Yeah, because I was trying to get the, and as you can see the flag is way out of focus, even though it's just above him. But I'm shooting at 1.4 or 1.6. So
right. You know, I don't know if people can make that detail out, but this is very instructive, Doug. Thank you. I mean, I want people to appreciate what Doug is doing with us here. He's essentially showing us the negatives from his camera. This is not something that professional photographers normally will do, right, Doug?
Oh yeah, I mean, but I mean, again, I want people to see what I saw.
So here's 6:10. We're going to be a few minutes after this because they started firing at 6:11, right? And look at that. It tells you the seconds.
Yeah. And you see the blood on his hand right there.
So this is 6:10 and 30 seconds. They're already shooting, not 6:11.
Well, this is what I had mine set up to whatever the global,
Right. Cesium fountain clock or something like that.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah. So
Probably
then he goes
all computers
down.
do that.
So he goes down, and I'm wondering what the hell's going on. And I'm running to the side of the stage thinking, where is he? And I run over, and by now, he's already covered up.
Uh-huh. So which is the one with the frozen bullet? It's funny that they've been publishing. I saw 6:11 and 33 seconds as the time that Trump was shot, but your photography seems to indicate that that was not entirely accurate.
That might have been whatever was on my.
Well, I think the reported number is inaccurate. 6:11 and 33 seconds sounded so precise to me. It just seemed odd.
Let me see if the zoom. Let's see. Let me see if I can scroll up and down. Nope. Let's see if I can do it. There it is, right there. So you can see. Can you see it close enough?
Can we go full frame on one image?
This, boom, right there. There it is. And you want full frame?
If you can.
That's the crop mode right there.
Right. The dotted line is showing us the cropped frame. Can we fill this screen with it or no?
You mean you want it up like that? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
more?
This is totally fine. However you've got it. Doug,
no, we'll go up. There you go. That's the raw file.
Right. I think people have got people have got a very good feeling for some of the technical aspects of how one of the world's, I'm talking about in the history of photography, one of the rarest and truly most interesting photographs ever taken, Doug. I really do appreciate you spending the time to explain it to me and my audience in such great detail. Is there anything that you'd like to promote other than your work at the New York Times? Do you have a website or anything like that?
No, I mean, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I haven't been doing much on Instagram now because the commentary just seems to be too, partisan. I am somebody who, Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter. I'm just doing my job. I am somebody who tries to be as fair can be. And there are people on the internet will tell you that Donald Trump loves me and loves my work and, always has.
I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yes, that is true. He is somebody who loves images. He is somebody who likes pictures. He is somebody who studies pictures. He is somebody who enjoys good pictures. He's also somebody who will tell me, Mills, I hated that picture. I hated that fucking picture.
What did he say to you about the bullet picture?
He said it was remarkable. He said, I can't believe you made that. That's the most incredible photo. And he's told other people when I'm in the, and in his company, he'll say, oh, that's the New York Times photographer who took the bullet picture. And they're like, oh my gosh. So yeah, I mean, he recognizes how unique it is and how remarkable and how lucky I was. He's the luckiest one in this whole
that's true
equation. I'm probably the second luckiest because I was able to capture one of the bullets. Sadly, there were other people that were not as lucky. And so I wanted to see if you could see that black thing that you were talking about earlier on his hat. If I keep going up.
Oh, well, I mean,
remember
the thing that I was getting at is that if there's a way to make the single image full screen on the Lightroom browser, that was...
Well, why don't I open up in Photoshop?
Sure.
I'll do that. Absolutely.
Right, because this aberration on the edge of the hat that somebody said was, color aberration. I don't think that's what it was.
How's that? Let me zoom down. How's that?
Still Lightroom.
This is in Photoshop.
I'm seeing the other screen. Maybe.
Oh, you're on Lightroom. Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, anyway, Doug, it was very nice of you to join us and share all these details. People who are not yet sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth, please visit odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, or subscribestar.com, or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Doug, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day and be safe at future rallies and anywhere that Donald Trump is around.
You got it, Jason. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Great.
Thank you.
Great to talk to your audience. And, if you have any other questions, please reach out to me.
Absolutely, Doug. And thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.